Good morning. This is Jason Dean coming live at you from Film Fanatic headquarters. Hope everyone's doing good. It is Wednesday morning at 10:08. So yeah, I've been away. I'm gonna be away again this week. Have to go to a funeral slash kind of remembrance thing down in Massachusetts. So I'll be away from my computer for about 4 or 5 days. So I won't be able to do any videos for a while. So just figured I'd sneak this video in. And then I was away last weekend as well from my computer, so I haven't been able to do any videos for about 3 or 4 days, 4 days or so. So I got a little bit of a lull, a little bit of a break from Film Fanatic here. I did a little mini tour with Osmia last weekend, which was super fun, and I'm going to probably do a video about that tour. We had a handful of shows out of state, and it was a super great time. Got back and have to kind of go back down to the same area more or less this week for this funeral. So these next 2 weeks are a little bit crazy, and then I'll be back. Next week. I think we're coming back Monday, and then back to the normal routine. School is back in session now. It's kind of crazy. We are in September, so I when I came back from our little mini tour, I went with my girlfriend and a friend to see Jaws in the theater. So today's show is about that. It's funny too because I just bought Jaws, the epic Steven Spielberg film, just celebrated. I think it was about I think it was in July, where it celebrated its 50th anniversary. Came out in '75. Just crazy. And I love that movie to death. It's a movie that it's one of those movies that I have seen so many times that could not possibly give you a number on how many times I've actually seen it. It's that high. And there's a lot of movies that I would say kind of fit in that category. I almost kind of consider Jaws for me, since I saw it a billion times. As growing up as a kid, seeing it on cable, seeing it on VHS, and then seeing it on DVD. Never saw it on Blu-ray until I recently just bought it. But it's one of those movies that I feel like for me is almost like a comfort food of a movie. It's even though it's kind of a terrifying movie. I always forget that the horror elements, how strong the suspense and the horror elements are for that movie. But I feel like it's kind of a comfort movie for me. It's like a big bowl of creamy, delicious mac and cheese and hot dogs or something. Like it's just really comforting. So I I recently about 2 months ago, right around the time when Jaws celebrated its 50th anniversary, they they put out this amazing, beautiful edition of Jaws, the 50th anniversary, on Blu-ray and also 4K. And I was at the movies with some friends a few months ago or so, and I think it was in July. I think it was a few weeks after they had a big re-release of this movie in the theater for a while in the theaters, and there were these big kind of big celebrations around the country in regards to the 50th anniversary of Jaws. And so they re-released the movie in the theater for a while, and then it was announced that they were going to be releasing it again on Blu-ray and 4K with a completely newly remastered version of that film, and had all new special features. Had a brand new documentary that was just shot in commemoration. So I was at the movies with some friends, and we were up in Augusta, and we went to Barnes and Noble afterwards, which is right next door, which is a pretty amazing shop. And I came across Jaws. They had it on Blu-ray, and they had it 30% off. I got it for like $10 or something. Like I couldn't believe how cheap it was. And I watched it, and I now so I know own it. And it's funny because Jaws was one of those movies. As much as I love it, it's definitely my top tier list of favorite movies of all time. I don't own it. It's one of the, it's a movie I've actually been on the quest for finding that definitive version of a particular movie, and I finally got it, and it's incredible. Like it, watching it when I first got it on Blu-ray. I've only watched it once, but when I sat down and watched it, it literally was like watching the movie the first time. The picture, the transfer, the remastering was just unbelievable because Jaws is a pretty dark film as far as the cinematography goes. Like there's a lot of nighttime shots, and I always felt growing up watching that movie there were certain scenes, and especially in the it's got one of the greatest openings ever for a film, and especially in that scene, like as terrifying as that film is, I always thought it was a little too dark. Like I couldn't really see some of the detail that I knew was there, as opposed to like probably seeing it in the theater when it was out, and it would have been the pixelation would have been so clear, and just the detail. But I always thought it's always been lost, and so watching it on Blu-ray, and I was just astounded by how incredible it was. It literally was like watching it for the first time. So shortly before I think it was the week of the tour that we were leaving for, we left on a Friday and came back Sunday. I just happened to come across on Facebook or online somewhere that the Strand Cinema in Rockland was going to be showing Jaws, and I was like, "Holy shit, that is amazing!" But then I read more about it, and they were going to be showing the 4K version of the film, and I was like, "Holy shit, fuck yeah, got to make this work." So I talked to some friends, my girlfriend, and we decided, okay, I'll be getting back Sunday. We kind of coordinated a little bit the time, the schedule, and we made a plan to go. So today's show is about that experience. And it's interesting because about a couple months ago, I don't know where it was. I think somebody I know told me about it, and I think I read about it somewhere that the Strand, which is again just one of the best theaters really in the state. It's an amazing movie theater. They have an amazing sound system. It got remade and remodeled quite a few years ago. It was basically you know a dilapidated old theater for a very long time, and then the town put a ton of money into it, restored it, and it's one of the most gorgeous theaters around. And they show obviously tons of movies, but they also have all kinds of events. They have comedians, they have music events, and all kinds of things. But primarily, it's still a movie theater. And so, I had heard a few months ago that the Strand is the only theater in this state that is equipped to show 4K movies, which really, from a technological standpoint, is the highest quality that you can see a movie. It's the apex of that, of that experience. And I don't own 4K. I have seen 4K movies, and I know like I have reservations to making that leap because that means I have to buy another copy of movies that I already own, which I might already have, like 5 versions of it. Like I always talk about this example of like, for instance, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre. one of my all-time favorite movies. I have multiple versions of that, and it just seems really overwhelming to buy yet another edition of that film. So, and the other thing I've heard about 4K is that not every movie, like if you get a really good quality Blu-ray version of the film, it's it's not always the case where it is superior to the Blu-ray version. Some movies there is a significant difference. Not all movies, and I've heard that some people who are really into, like myself, but people who are into, especially who are especially into the 4K format, have said that some films, like if you get a really good version of that film on Blu-ray, it's just as good. There isn't really a sizable difference between making that upgrade and 4K. And I've also heard, it's pretty mixed. But then I've also heard that certain films are just superior on 4K. So but I've always been kind of like, I don't know if I want to make that leap. Maybe someday. But I know 4K is incredible. It absolutely is incredible. And I had heard that the Strand, again, like I said, is the only theater that can show 4K. So when I saw this in the paper or online, I was like, holy shit, okay, we gotta see it. So I went to it, and I went with my friend Zafra and my girlfriend Heather, and either of them, Zafra had said he had not seen Jaws. It had been like, I think he said like 15 or 20 years since he had seen it, which is crazy. And then Heather said she hadn't seen it probably even longer than that. And I was just like, wow, like that's crazy, you know. And I told him, well, I just bought it. I had just bought Jaws on the 50th anniversary on Blu-ray, and I had just watched it a couple weeks ago. So it's just pretty funny. And so I was very excited. I was very, very excited to see it. And in the beginning of the movie, we got our tickets. We sat up in the balcony, and in the beginning of the film, they had some excerpts, or they had an interview that they were playing from that Steven Spielberg gave. There's a big, it's on my version too that I have the Blu-ray version, but there's a really cool kind of interview with Steven Spielberg that was just done, a brand new interview with him, and he's talking about the movie, and he kind of gives an introduction to the film, but then also he talks mostly about this 4K edition, how it was remastered and restored, the sound. So, and of course, everyone knows, one of the biggest, most fantastic aspects or things about Jaws is the Jaws soundtrack composed by John Williams, which is arguably the greatest, film score ever made. So and he was talking about that being restored and remastered, and that really, from a music standpoint, I mean, not only is this movie, like Quentin Tarantino has said, I saw an interview with Tarantino, and he was saying that like he feels Jaws is an example of like the perfect movie, and it really is. But there, from a music standpoint, it's they talk about this aspect of in the documentary, the new documentary, how not only is this like just a perfect movie and arguably the best Spielberg movie and one of the scariest movies. I think it's got some incredibly bone chilling scenes and things that you see in this film. Um, as far as like the way a soundtrack works in the film, and where it's such a strong component of the movie, where it almost takes on this thing of where it is a character in the movie, and and I think historically Jaws was one of those movies. What John Williams did with that score, which is genius. It really in this documentary they talk about how that really put a light on what music can do in the film, and to where the score can be a character in the film. It can be so strong and be such and just really enhance the experience of seeing the movie. And I really think that was, you know, to some degree, you know, the soundtrack, the film score is so strong that I think filmmakers started thinking about the power of music in films. I think that was, you know, kind of the one of the biggest achievements of this movie. And since then, I think historically, you know, now 50 years later, you know, now soundtracks are such a major component for films, and they're taken really seriously. And I think Jaws was that movie that really, you know, from a film score perspective, really ushered that in. That how strong and powerful the film score can be for a movie. You know, and then you have all of these other aspects from a technical aspect, the camera work, you know, just the narrative, the story, the characterization. I mean, all of these things. It was a truly innovative movie, and of course with the special effects, you know, they don't use. You don't see. That's one of the things that was amazing about watching it on the big screen. And I have to say, it was astounding. It really was absolutely astounding. And I did see a difference. I did see a little bit of a difference in quality between the version that I have. Really, really close. I don't know, honestly, if I would say it's better and that it would necessarily make me go out and get a Blu-ray player, like buy a Blu-ray player and take that plunge and then buy this on. I mean, get. I wouldn't say it necessarily caused caused me to want to go buy a 4K player, I should say, and buy this movie on 4K. It was it was so damn close, like as far as the version that I have, which is Blu-ray and 4K. But it was, I will say, it was at times probably better. But you know, by a really small percentage as far as like the clarity of it. But just aside from all of that, it was jaw dropping to see on the big screen. I mean, it was astounding. The sound, the thing I was most impressed with the most with watching it on the big screen was the sound. It was like they had it cranked and it was fucking intense. And we sat like the first row of the balcony, so we had a really good seats, and we were like right in the sweet spot, I think, as far as where the speakers are, and being kind of in the center. We were in that sweet spot for the maximum experience. That was my feeling of where we were. And again, it goes back to that same thing that I talk about a lot. It was as many times as I've seen this movie, Jaws, which I could not even come close to counting the amount of times that I've seen it. It really is like that thing of like seeing it for the first time. And going into the movie, I was pretty tired. I hadn't slept so well the couple of days that I was out of town, the few days I was out of town, and the night before we came back, the show that we had on Saturday was in Rhode Island, and Rhode Island is only about 5 to 6 hours away. So I did the driving back, and I was a little worried about the time that I was going to be, cutting it close. But we made really good time, and it took about 5.5 hours. But I did all the driving, but we left really early, and I did not sleep very well the night before. And so I came home after, driving, and we dropped everyone off. I got dropped off and whatever, unloaded some of our gear, and I kind of chilled out for a while and took a shower. But I basically hadn't really slept very well. So I was kind of dragging ass, and we got some food before, and I was a little worried that I was going to be like, just too tired, and maybe have moments of where I would doze off. But that did not happen. I was totally fucking awake, totally alert for this movie. Didn't drink, I didn't even drink any coffee or soda. Totally into it. And I was, and it's a 2 hour movie, and I was totally into it. I was totally, I felt fresh, totally in the moment. I felt focused. You know, the best way to see a movie, especially a movie that is just so damn good. And that's testimony to how just incredible this movie is, Jaws. And so, you know, and again, like I said, I talked about, you know, that Quentin Tarantino interview I had seen a while ago where he talked about Jaws being an example of like the perfect movie. I mean, you have such an incredible cast: Roy Scheider, Richard Dreyfuss. I mean, just the list goes on. You have just amazing characters. Um, right away, you're thrust into the story, and I think, you know, being a horror fan, being, you know, the horror genre being my favorite style of movies, you know, I always forget. I don't know why, but I always forget when I watch Jaws on how strong the horror elements are for Jaws, and also the suspense of this movie. And it's one of those things where you don't see the monster, in this case the shark. You don't see him until the last, basically the last half of the movie, the third act. There's like an hour and a half where you don't see the shark really at all. And that, you know, when you read about or you see the documentaries about Jaws, you know, they they had so many problems trying to create this shark, build it, and make it look realistic. And you know, again, this was there was no there, you know, way before any computer generated graphics. You know, light years before CGI. I think if this movie was made now with CGI, it would look like shit. I really do. Everything is handcrafted in this movie. But the reason that you don't see the shark at all, it's really implied. You just see the fin, and sometimes you don't even see that. Is I think it's like there's two reasons why that is the case. One, the biggest being technically they just couldn't pull it off. They didn't know how to really, you know, how to make it work. It didn't look really great when they were trying to use the monster or the shark that they built. They tried to originally tried to use it more, and it just was not working. Wasn't believable. That's really the main reason. But I also feel like Steven Spielberg's a genius filmmaker. But they were very much in key with like the idea of less is more. Like what you don't see is often more terrifying than what you do see. But when you finally do see the sea jaws, the shark, it is terrifying. But there's all this area for you to use your imagination as the viewer because a lot of the stuff he's hidden away the whole time, and but yet your imagination as a viewer just runs wild. So it leaves so much wonderful space for your imagination, and it's brilliant. And it's that less is more thing, like the monster. You know, the monster in the closet, the monster under your bed. You know that, or that old dark house kind of aesthetic of where things are sometimes implied, or you're only seeing little fragments of it. But because it's not, you're not, you know, shown everything right away. In this case, the monster. It's it leaves it. It just makes for such more of an enjoyable experience, and it just builds the tension. I mean, Alien, for instance, perfect example, you know, of that. And it's brilliant. It was a brilliant choice, and I think that, you know, the way that they build that suspense is just incredible. But every time I watch this movie, I always forget the horror elements of this movie are just really strong and so terrifying. I think, you know, being horror being my favorite genre, I really think that the opening sequence to Jaws with the girl getting killed on the beach is truly one of the greatest moments in horror. I really do. I think it's so iconic, and it's one of the most terrifying sequences ever shot. And it's it's I almost feel like Jaws is kind of a slasher movie in some ways, and it was. I mean, there were so many great exploitation movies that came out of that were inspired. Maniac, my favorite slasher film, massively influential on it. The Car, another amazing exploitation movie, and many other films. So just such a such an iconic film. It changed cinema forever. It was one of the first films in history that really, I think, truly terrified people. But then I also feel, it's one of the most influential movies ever made. And it's interesting too because I feel like it is a terrifying horror film, but yet it has so many other elements. It's got some very great comedy. It's a very funny movie at times. There's some levity to the story. There's some great drama. There's an incredible amount of suspense, and I think that was a big influence from Hitchcock. Just incredible, great characters. And of course the score. I mean, it's got so many elements, and it's a movie that yeah, you could see it being like kind of a family film, but then the horror elements are so strong that it's utterly terrifying. And I don't think, you know, uh, probably certain kids or kids at a certain age should maybe see this movie because it is terrifying. But it's really terrifying, and I always find it kind of interesting too that people that I know that don't necessarily like horror films to the degree that I do, they love Jaws. And again, when I watch Jaws, I'm like, wow, like this is. There's moments of this movie where it's truly terrifying. The last act of this film too. I mean, just and the some of the deaths in this movie and the blood, and I always find it interesting that people that aren't into horror films as much as I do love this movie as much as I do because the aspects of horror in this movie are just so tremendously strong and terrifying, truly terrifying and scary. I could imagine seeing this movie in the theater, like, and but yet I think the thing that bridges that gap or maybe makes it easier for other people who are not necessarily so into horror films like I am to really embrace this movie is that it does have all of those other aspects. To a degree, it's got a little bit of that, or it's got that kind of family oriented kind of theme to it, and it is kind of a film like a popcorn movie you can take your kids to an extent, and it's got the drama, it's got comedy, but yeah, I mean, it's one of those movies I feel like bridges that gap, and just being an incredibly huge fan of horror films, it's I look at this movie being first and foremost just an incredible horror film. Yeah, I think it's easily the best or the most terrifying movie Spielberg's ever done, and it's a scary film. It's actually a scary film, and I always forget on how, again, like how powerful those elements are for this movie. But seeing it in 4K was astounding and amazing, and can't say enough good things about this masterpiece. So I was really, really excited that I got to see this film on the big screen because, yeah, I've had some other experiences seeing some just incredible films at the Strand, Halloween, Touch of Evil by Orson Welles. I've seen some just incredible films there, like where it's like the director's cut, it's restored. Yeah, incredible. So I just couldn't wait to talk about my experience on seeing Jaws on the big screen in 4K. So thanks again, and you won't hear from me for a little while. So take care, and thanks for the love and support, and we will see you soon. Peace.